What book showed you what was possible? This was really important to me, and feel free to play along. If you're on Amazon, all 40 of the books are on there, as well as a t-shirt, so you can play along on there. And then for y'all that are also watching at home, you can check out the links in the chat. And everything I'm talking about, again, is below. It's a little bit more extensive at bringingworth.tv, so be sure and check it out, because there's certain limitations. Like, I literally hit the cap as far as how many things I could talk about on LinkedIn and on Amazon. So when you talk about 40 books, just to warn you, there's a lot of content there. So feel free to dig in now, or when you watch the replay later on, and there's more books you want to get into. There's a few books that fit into this category. There's a lot of them, in fact, most of them. But the one that really stood out when I was trying to make this list, which was hard, it was a hard list. Again, I've done 27 books myself. You know what I mean? So I love books. The one that stands out is this one, Fast Food Nation, The Dark Side of the All-American Meal. Do you see how brown these pages are? These pages are almost as brown as I am. Like, these are brown pages. So I want to say this book came out around the time I was done with grad school, which was in the early 2000s. I'll leave it at that. And I got my master's in magazine publishing. And what this book taught me was that it's possible to take something that everyone believes they know, such as fast food meals. I learned more about that, way more about that when I became a parent, what to avoid and not avoid and all that stuff. Other parents can relate to this. You can take something that's as cliche, as provincial, pull out all my fancy words today, as mundane as a fast food meal, and then talk about the different challenges that are happening with migrants, particularly from Mexico, Central America, and even some South American countries. You can talk about the bioengineering. This is when GMOs first started, or at least when we first heard about it. You can put on your tin hat for that one. When we first heard about GMOs was a couple decades ago. You can talk about the political system and how things work. You can talk about the scientists who are also in New Jersey, believe it or not. There's a whole chapter about New Jersey and how they are chemically engineering the fries that you eat at McDonald's to make them more addictive. Deep stuff. That is not a conspiracy. There's a whole chapter on it. This guy, Eric Schlosser, shout out to him, is a well-known and respected journalist. I got my master's in magazine publishing, so I respect and see the craft in this. And it was one of the best books I ever read to show not only what was possible as far as educating the public, but also what was possible as far as the other side of it, as far as being a creator, as far as being a journalist. You could be a hard-nosed, as I scratch my nose, you could be a hard-nosed journalist, or you can be one of the feature writers, which is a lot of stuff that I did, like the softer journalism, as they call it, or people stories, things of that nature. But then you could take those skills from the newspaper world, from the magazine world, from the online world, because blogs and online publishing was just starting at that time, again, a couple decades ago. And you could apply it to a 600-page book. This became a bestseller many times over. This is the first paperback edition, but there's many new editions of it. I think there's even movies connected to it. They came out and sold the movie rights. So there's a movie that's based on it loosely, talking about the system that goes into getting your kids chicken nuggets. The depth and the power of it really changed the course of my career. Because I was like, oh, I can talk about anything. I can talk about the Golden Arches and because I didn't have kids yet. So it's like a cheap meal, like a Big Mac or whatever that my friends and I might get. And I can have a whole discussion about the history of America. This gets to the history of America. When I was heavily involved in the publishing industry, they would call this a microhistory, which means you take one particular thing, like a Happy Meal, and you're able to tell the history, the All-American Meal, the history of America based on that. And we're talking about racism, we're talking about immigration, we're talking about, again, public policies, we're talking about health, we're talking about science, we're talking about genetic engineering and GMOs, right when they started becoming a discussion point. Like, just the amount of eye-opening things in here. I read this regularly I used to read it every year. Now I read it like every other year. In fact, it's about time for me to read it now. Fantastic book. If you have not checked it out, if you are a creator, as in a writer or a journalist or an author, you need this on your shelf to see what's possible, even to this day. To this day, as the meme says. If you are into consuming food, which most of us are, and or you want to understand the dynamics that go into immigration and or policies, there's even shout out to Upton Sinclair with his book The Jungle, which came out at the turn of the last century, about a century and 20 years ago, which was inspiration for this. You go back and read that, and there are so many things that he reformed that end up being reformed based on that book, which was based in Chicago and the stockyards. Shout out to Chicago. As I said, I was graduate at Northwestern. All that history, all that change can happen from just one book. Eric did the exact same thing on a bigger scale, obviously, because things are way more global now with Fast Food Nation. Even some of the stuff that's being revealed in, you give a shout out in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. And I want to say in Kansas, where they just discovered serious child labor and some of the stockyards / chicken coop places. Like, there's so many different names for it, butchers, what have you. And there's like kids that are a little bit older than my eldest kid who just turned 10, his age, they're doing this stuff. They talk about child labor in here. So there's so many things that are still relevant today. Please get this book, one of my highest recommendations of all the stuff I'm talking about in here. So for y'all, what books showed you what was possible? For me, again, it was Fast Food Nation. I'll throw the link up. But what showed you what was possible? For me, Eric's stellar work, he won all kinds of awards, being a bestseller. It showed me that I could change the world based on the work I was doing. If that's not power, if that's not motivation, I don't know what is. What more do you need to get up in the morning? The shit that you're going to do is going to transform the world or has a possibility to do so. What more do you need? For me, that's what I needed. His work has still over 1 million copies sold, so I'm not the only one. I just noticed that at the top. And it's back in the day. I'm sure it's done 2 or 3 mil. Again, shout out to Eric. Again, this was enough to put the battery in my back. So what motivated y'all? I'd love to hear in the comments. Throw something below. All right, so today we're talking about the 40 books to transform